Patriots wide receiver N'Keal Harry has requested a trade from the Patriots. And because he is a wide receiver in the NFL and has a pulse, I have received DMs about it. Grossi Packer Nation, welcome to another episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. How many wide receivers we got on this ship? Grossi, and today we're going to be talking about if the Packers should be making some moves, some money moves, and trying to acquire N'Keal Harry from the New England Patriots. Do they need him? How much would he cost? And is it even worth it based on what he has shown he could do in the NFL thus far? All that and more on Packcast. Before we get to that, I want to do a big shout and thank you to some brand new patrons and YouTube members. First, over on the Patreon side of things, we have Wumbo Lombardi. Also says Suns in 5. We're just going to ignore that second part. We have Unlucky Gamer 24/7. And finally, and the Super Bowl 56 MVP is Tom Grossi, wide receiver, Green Bay Packers. Someone's been getting into my dream journal. And over on the YouTube side of things, we have Tyler Stone, we have Ryan Dreschler, we have Ready, Set, Mex, we have Bruin1, and Mason Dykstra. A big shout out and thank you to you all. Now, last week, to be specific, July 6th, you had N'Keal Harry's agent come out and it made its way around social media, basically formally requesting a trade from the New England Patriots on behalf of his client. It says that over the past 2 years, he's been trying to work with the Patriots to get Harry more involved with the offense. However, he thinks that it'd be best for both the organization and the player to just go their separate ways, hence the trade request. Now, N'Keal Harry is a first-round pick back in 2019, and I know a lot of people are going to make fun of the Patriots because of all the wide receivers they passed up on, but N'Keal Harry coming out of college, I will be honest, what was attractive about him was he was able to win those 50-50 balls, right? He was a deep threat. He was able to go and get those contested catches, and yeah, that was a pretty big highlight that you saw all throughout his tape, because I remember looking at N'Keal Harry. And then when he went to the Patriots, I know my initial reaction was like, oh crap, like they just got themselves a really good player. However, over the past 2 seasons, he has not really lived up to that first round pick name, because taking a look at some of his stats, the past 2 seasons, he's only played in 21 games. He's only started 14 times, has had 81 targets, only 45 receptions for 414 yards and 4 touchdowns, which is really not so great. Now, in his rookie season, he suffered a major injury and missed a whole lot of time, and then he actually missed a couple of games last season. And to be fair, you had some weird thing with Tom Brady after the Texans game because like he's screaming at all the receivers on the sidelines. Then he just didn't want to throw to N'Keal Harry after that. So that was a weird thing. And then of course you had Cam Newton come in, and Cam Newton was singing his praises, but that didn't really translate into production for N'Keal Harry. Now throw on top of that the Patriots in this offseason basically threw money at just about everybody, including some receiving tight ends, as well as bringing in some other wide receivers. So right off the bat, it didn't look good for N'Keal Harry coming into the season. And now, of course, that he's requested a trade, I would imagine it's going to continue to not look so good. Now, I will say there is some nuance to this because it's not just looking at the player and going like, oh, the player isn't good, because looking at what the Patriots are doing with him and how they're utilizing him, they're not really utilizing him to his strengths and what he did well in college. Instead, he's kind of just running like these little short routes and everything. And listen, I said it before, in college, he'd win those 50-50 balls. But the problem that you could also identify from that was that he can't get separation from the defender. And that seems to have been a big problem. And that seems to be a big problem in the NFL because according to PFF, he's open on just 25.5% of his targets against single coverage. He's ranking 99 out of 100, which is really not so great. Now, again, if you can win those matchups, then that's wonderful. But if you're unable to get any separation and you're just running these little short routes on the outside, yeah, it's probably not going to be good. And the stats are basically corroborating that story. On top of that, the past 2 years, there's really been a lack of options at wide receiver for the Patriots besides Julian Edelman. And so the fact that the Patriots haven't figured out what to do with N'Keal Harry and his production is still so low, that's just bad all around. And taking a look at what the future might hold for N'Keal Harry if he stays with the Patriots, he says that he's still going to show up to training camp, which makes a lot of sense because he could be charged a whole lot of money for every day that he is going to miss. So the Patriots could wind up just holding on to him and stashing him on the roster, and if he somehow finds a role, then great. If not, well, then it's not like it's costing them a lot of money because he's on the 3rd year of his rookie deal. Now, because he's a first-round pick, he is eligible for a 5th-year extension, so if he decides to go off, you know, maybe they'll decide to utilize that, but I would imagine that they're most likely not going to, unless he literally has an amazing year. So in other words, it's a super cheap contract, and unless the Patriots are really enticed with an offer, they don't have to get rid of him. So this gets into the conversation of how much would it cost? Well, obviously his production hasn't been there. He's been injured the past 2 seasons. He's not gonna get a day 1 or arguably a day 2 pick. Maybe he would get, he would get something like a 4th rounder for him. And if that was the price, honestly, for the Packers, I think that's too high. If the Patriots are willing to let him go for a 5th or a 6th and just cutting their losses, then I say, yeah, Packers should definitely go for it just because the risk-reward ratio is definitely in the benefit of the Green Bay Packers. Because either he comes in, he contributes, and great, or not, and you just gave up a 5th or a 6th round pick. Now, the other question, of course, becomes, do the Packers even need him, right? They drafted Amari Rodgers, and already on the roster, you have Devontae Adams, at least for another season. And then you have guys who are still hovering around, like MVS, EQ, Lazard. And listen, they were the #1 ranked offense in terms of scoring last year with that crew. So now you add a weapon like Amari Rodgers, yeah, they could be even better. Is there any room for N'Keal Harry? He was going to come in, learn a brand new system. I mean, you could argue no, but at the same time, if the Packers utilize his skill set and being a deep threat, then he could potentially bring something to the table that a lot of these other guys can't. I mean, I know Devin Funches is going to play this year, but the jury's still out on how he's going to do. MVS is the deep threat, but, you know, remains a bit inconsistent, even though he did really well at the end of last year. There's a lot of question marks when it comes to wide receivers on this team, on top of the fact that all of them are going to be free agents after this year, except for Amari Rodgers. So I think there's definitely room to bring a guy in, but the price has to be super duper low for the Packers to take a flyer on him. And again, unless it's like a 5th or a 6th round pick, I think the Packers are going to have to pass, but who knows? Crazier things have happened. Maybe they could get a deal done before training camp. It wouldn't really crush their cap in any way because he is on such a cheap deal, but we'll see if the Packers decide to make a move on him. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Patriots fans, how do we feel about keeping N'Keal Harry? If you were going to give him away, how much would it be for? And Packers fans, do we want him? Let me know what you think. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy on all social media. See down below. Check out podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout and thank you to all the patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy and the YouTube members. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.